It seems like it was just yesterday when Marvel President Dan Buckley was groveling, asking Tom Brevoort to move from Avengers to X-Men to save the brand, and then went to Comics Pro and promised the world to comic book retailers, we're going to reset the company. We're going to fix everything. We're going to hold the line at $4.99 or $3.99. We're going to do events better. It's been about 4 or 5 months since Comics Pro 2024, and absolutely nothing has changed. It is business as usual at Marvel Comics. Hey, guess what? We're going to remove Zeb Wells. We're going to bring in Joe Kelly, but it's not going to be on an extended run. It's only going to be there for a temporary thing. Oh, and we're going to shove Justina Ireland in there, a writer nobody cares about that's only going to bring the quality of the book down, because it is Marvel Comics as normal. No status quo change when it comes to Marvel Comics as their business, especially under Dan Buckley, who's been there, I believe, since 1990. So a little bit over 34 years, something like that. Maybe he's just too far gone, like Marvel Comics, to actually be able to change the fortunes not only of Marvel, but really the entire comic book industry, because as Marvel goes, the comic book industry goes, and the comic book industry is kind of in the toilet right now. Not a lot of excitement out there. A few things here and there, but for the most part, Marvel Comics, their 616 line especially, is basically unreadable trash. There's nothing standing out there. There's nothing exciting. We do have the X-Men reboot. Doesn't sound exciting whatsoever. We're getting a new writer on Spider-Man. Could be exciting, but it's only a temporary fix until, I don't know, Christopher Can't Write Wells' schedule clears up, or somebody that bad or worse takes over, because things will never get better if they don't stop blaming DC Comics for fixing the distribution issue that was happening at the time, and actually take these things seriously and start fixing themselves. The comic book industry cannot be fixed without Marvel leading the way. The bad thing is the predicament that everybody associated business-wise with Marvel Comics is the last entity in the comic book industry that will fall is Marvel. So they actually don't have to fix anything. They can watch everyone else die, and then they die. They don't have to go out there and help retailers. They don't have to go out there and show a better way for DC Comics or the smaller publishers out there, because they have the most fans. They will feel it less until basically it's too late. And it feels like we've been going that direction for a very, very long time. If you need a little reminder of what Dan Buckley had to say and how he was blaming everyone but himself at Comics Pro, recently at a closed-door business-to-business conference for comic publishers and comic stores, Marvel Comics President Dan Buckley spoke bluntly about the recent past in the comic business and optimistically about their place in the comic business. Most recently, we have all been challenged by the pandemic, supply chain madness, inflation, and significant shift in distribution landscape, Buckley said at the 2024 Comics Pro meeting's keynote speech. And I understand that we all likely have very negative feelings about the pandemic. Some people were on board with it. Some people weren't on board with it. When I say not on board with it, all the government mandates and their intervention, which basically exacerbate the problem and just put people out of business. Some people are likely still a little bit shell-shocked. Maybe they have a little PTSD after seeing what happened not only to their businesses, but to their jobs, potentially what happened to their kids because they couldn't go to school and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to downplay the significance of the pandemic. It was a big deal, and it affected a lot of people. We're a couple of years down the road from the pandemic. Restaurants are opened up and fully operational. Everything that was closed down is basically up and running. Is it the exact same landscape as it was before? It never could be, but it's as close to that as you're ever going to get. We can't blame the pandemic from now until eternity. We can't be like in 20 years, like, man, we would just be in such a better place if that pandemic didn't happen 20 years ago. You can't have that type of mindset. I don't think Dan Buckley or Tom Brevoort, C.B. Cebulski, or even the chief creative officer, Kevin Feige, really give two craps about the comic book industry at this point. I think they're very content and happy to just go as business as usual, because they know they'll be the last ones affected, and never actually try to implement real change and real differences that could really have a positive impact on the comic book industry itself. It's much easier to just sit in your spot that you've had for over 30 years and wait for that retirement check, especially if you're Tom Brevoort, especially if you're a Dan Buckley. C.B. Cebulski has also been a longtime employee of Marvel Comics. And I imagine they're just waiting it out because they have no incentive to change. And why would they change? They can just say, it was the pandemic. What did I do wrong? I didn't do nothing. It was the pandemic. The pandemic is the one that did this and did that. We've got to get out of the pandemic destroyed everything and actually start addressing the issues. And Dan Buckley himself promised at Comics Pro he was going to do that. Namely, that they were going to do better events, claiming that they had focused in on old school Marvel Comics event styling, the way they used to plan it out and get together. And they said Blood Hunt was going to be a great example of that. And they also promised we're going to get our pricing under control, which is one of the real things that's turning a lot of people off. Comic books are simply too expensive. Now, I understand infrastructure costs have gone up. Fuel costs have gone up. Supply costs have gone up. As a result, I don't think completely because of the pandemic. I think it's actually been a lot of governance issues that are driving up a lot of prices, and we do have hyperinflation basically going on right now. So we know that making comic books are more expensive now, but we also know that Marvel Comics under Dan Buckley and C.B. Cebulski and Tom Brevoort are paying people less to make those comic books. We also know that they drove those prices up well above the rate of inflation for the last 20, 25 years or so, to the point where the average price of a comic book, taking into account inflation and where it should have been, was already double what it should have been. So they've already put themselves in a bad place, and they've screwed up price. Of course, the shills out there are making excuses and are really excited to see this reset that was promised 5 months ago and has yielded literally zero change to Marvel Comics. This is what the Popverse had to say. It's too early to be able to guess what end result will come from these efforts beyond a more stable price point in Marvel comic book universe that will be more cohesive as a whole to readers. But the primary takeaway should perhaps be one that those who work in comics and just like to read them alike can take some comfort in. Under Dan Buckley's lead, Marvel is committed to not only be part of the wider comic community, but take a leadership role in it once again. Well, that's great news. I would love to see Marvel take the charge and lead the way to actually fixing the comic book universe. We were promised a more stable universe, more cohesive Marvel Comics universe, and that, according to Dan Buckley, Blood Hunt was the big example. That was going to be the bright, shining example that we received, that things were more stable, more cohesive, and they were getting back to quality at Marvel Comics. What has Blood Hunt been? Does it seem like a group of, 10 creators got into a room and hashed out a story and were like, wow, we could take this really big and we could connect it here and here and there, and we could make some things that really matter that people can buy into. And if they missed it, they'll be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I missed that. I need to go check that out too, because everything in this is so badass and it's so wide sweeping and it's going to be so impactful to the entirety of Marvel Comics. I can't get enough. Has that been a single reader of Marvel Comics experience with Blood Hunt? It's a mini-series that should have been perhaps an Avengers series. I don't even think it's an Avengers story, to be completely honest. I think it's just some Elseworlds mini-series that they should have told. It should have been continuity, and it certainly should have been 60 issues. What is happening outside of Blood Hunt that ties into all this stuff? They have one series that kicks ass. It's called Wolverine Blood Hunt from Tom Waltz, not a guy that works at Marvel Comics. And one Jose Reap, who certainly has worked at Marvel Comics, but is not, a steady artist for Marvel Comics. It absolutely kicks ass. You want to know why it kicks ass? Because it's Wolverine fighting vampires. Because the homework wasn't very difficult, and that's basically what he's doing. It connects to nothing. Nothing that happens in Wolverine Blood Hunt, the best miniseries in a 60-issue event thing that's all supposedly tied together, means nothing to the totality of the story being told. It will never affect anything going on within Blood Hunt itself. And don't even get me into the stuff that Jed MacKay is doing. So in issue 3, we're told that Bloodline, the daughter of Blade you likely forgot even existed, is the key, the crux to the whole thing, and that ultimately she's going to have to slay her own father. It's been foretold, Dracula forgot to mention it to her or whatever, and it's played up like she's going to be a big deal. I personally did not like that change. I thought it was stupid, but it was probably one of the better done moments in Blood Hunt number 3, a very underwhelming comic book itself. Guess how many times they even say the name Bloodline in Blood Hunt number 4? The penultimate issue, that supposedly we're going to see Bloodline kill her father Blade in the next issue. How many times do we see the character? 0. How many times do they mention her name? 0. Because none of this matters. They didn't get 10 people together to hash out a big event and say, yeah, we're going to connect it this way, and this is how we're going to get effect over here, and this is what we're going to do effect over here, and we're all going to meet up at the end, and people's minds are going to be blown because we've really mapped this thing out and put in all the hard work by getting the right people in the room together. None of that shit happened. This is business as usual. This is Avengers versus Fantastic Four Empire from Dan Slott. This is Axe Judgment Day from Kieran Gillen. This is every other generic, lame-ass event that means nothing in the long game to Marvel Comics. It means nothing to the readers. There will be no long-term ramifications. We do know Miles Morales will continue to be a vampire. Who fucking cares? He's not even Spider-Man. He's just fake Spider-Man. Nobody's reading that book anyway. It's written by Cody Ziegler, a guy that doesn't know how to write comic books. And perhaps, maybe, just maybe, Black Panther will remain a vampire as well. Well, guess what we don't have right now, numbnuts? A fucking Black Panther comic book to continue the story in. The two things that are going to come out of this, nobody really cares about. The only thing that's going to happen is Blade's going to die. They're going to do a miniseries to bring Blade back from hell. Wow. Have we ever seen that story before? Did we not just see it in the resurrection of Magneto or so many other times? They continuously tell the same goddamn story over and over again, yet I'm supposed to believe that Marvel Comics are leading the way by bringing back that continuity and that effort into quality and really making things matter. Nothing matters. Dan Buckley's big example of why we should continue to buy into Marvel Comics in 2024, Blood Hunt, is an enormous nothing burger. As a result of the pandemic, the comic book industry became fragmented in ways that we hadn't seen in decades. If the biggest single publisher in the business is committed to bring everyone back together, that can only be a good thing, especially if it means more $3.99 comic books as a result, according to the Poppers. Now, he announced this 4 or 5 months ago. We've got solicitations all the way out to September, well over 6 months after Dan Buckley announced their commitment to the $3.99 price point, unless, of course, it's an event, it's a #1 issue, it's a milestone issue, or if it has a creator or character that we deem to be important. So there's a lot of caveats on that. I just so happen to have the numbers for September 2024 when it comes to Marvel Comics publishing. 73 new comic books for an average of $4.70, which is basically right around exactly the average price point for Marvel Comics in February of 2024 when the conference happened. Literally no change. 16 #1 issues, $4.75 on average. The #1 issues are a little bit cheaper on average right now because the big event that month happens to be Venom War, and nobody fucking cares about Venom War. They care about Venom War even less than they cared about Blood Hunt. They are not changing the prices. They are not committed to a cheaper price point. They're not going to go all in on $3.99. They're going to go all in on $3.99 for Champions. They're going to go all in on a $3.99 book. If it's written by Colin Kelly or Jackson Lanzig, or it's an NYX book, or anything that nobody would ever, in their right mind, ever want to buy, everything else is $4.99 and above. Here's the most egregious example. There's a book coming out. It's a miniseries. It's called Aliens versus Avengers. I like Aliens. I like Avengers. You got a creative team on it of Jonathan Hickman, great writer, probably the only A-list writer left at Marvel Comics, if you want to consider him that. Asad Ribic coming back. Haven't seen him really illustrate anything in a couple years at the Big Two. Huge Asad Ribic fan. That's a really good creative team. Issue number, I believe it's 2, in September 2024, is 40 pages. Typically, because that's a plus-size issue, Marvel had been charging $4.99 for 40-page comic books because they're plus-size, they're special. Guess how much Aliens versus Avengers #2, it's not the #1 issue, the #2 issue for Marvel Comics is in September. $7.99. $8 fucking dollars. Are you kidding me? $3 above what they are charging for every other 40-page comic book that isn't like a #1 or milestone. Are you kidding me, Marvel Comics? Are you kidding me, Dan Buckley? Are you kidding me, Popverse, that you actually think anything is going to change under the leadership of Dan Buckley? If things were going to change, they would have changed by now. If he was going to get better, he wouldn't have improved the line under the stewardship of Joe Quesada in the early 2000s and all that stuff, and then led the Titanic right into the iceberg anyway. Dan Buckley wouldn't have approved all the changes to the characters when the Avengers were the hottest name, not only in comic books, but in pop culture. Yes, let's replace them all at the exact same time. That's what people are looking for. They're looking for Ironheart. They're looking for Gogurt Hulk. And all this stupid stuff. They're looking for Jane Foster Thor. This dude is a fucking moron. And anyone that believes that Dan Buckley has the best interest of the comic book industry in mind, you're a fool. If you think that Marvel Comics under his leadership are going to fix anything, you are a fool. He blatantly lied to us. He said things are going to get better. They have not gotten better. He said events are going to be more cohesive. They're going to be more meaningful. They are not more meaningful. He even pointed out, as Blood Hunt being the example, and I would say that's the perfect example of knowing that it's not going to happen. He said we're going to lower the prices. They have not done that. They literally will never change anything. The comic book industry cannot fix itself until Marvel leads the way and starts fixing Dan Buckley, Marvel Comics, Kevin Feige, CB Cebulski, Tom Brevoort. Stop blaming the pandemic. Look in the mirror and see your own culpability in the enormous shit show that's going on in LCS's nationwide, and how you put an entire industry. In my earlier coverage, when this happened at Comics Pro 2024 and you didn't see it, there's a video right here breaking it all down, all the stuff that Dan Buckley promised and hasn't delivered on even 6 months into the big reset and change happening in Marvel Comics.